Hello there and welcome. This is the third part of the planting and harvesting system. At this point, we can create any seed that we want, we can plant it, and then we can create any kind of model for different fruits or vegetables. And when this plant grows and advances through the days, then it also changes its models. So it simulates different stages of growth, and then it reaches the final day when it produces the fruit, and we can basically pick up the fruit, and then newer fruits will appear after several days. We still cannot actually pick up the fruit, but this is the first thing that we're going to deal with. Then we're also going to deal with the option to harvest the plant entirely, and we also want to be able to water the plant so it will only grow when the plant is watered. In order to pick up the fruit, we don't need to do much because we already have this system created from before. We have the interactable object, and we use this interactable object on any item that we want to pick up. So all we need to do is go into our tomato prefab. So we go into the resources and we have this tomato. And this is relevant for any other fruit or vegetable that you're going to have. And over here, we're simply going to add the interactable object script. Then inside the interactable object script, we also need to give the name of the fruit. Or vegetable, of course. Now, if you remember, if we want to pick up any item, the player needs to be in range. So one option will be to add another collider on these tomatoes and then make it trigger and increase the size of the collider. But this is not ideal because we're going to have a bunch of different tomatoes stuck together, and maybe it's going to give us different bugs where we pick up the wrong tomato, although it's not really important, but it's not going to be nice when the player tries to pick up one tomato and the other tomato disappears. So instead, we're going to use the second way to detect the player range, and we already have this system created from previous episodes, and this will be by checking the distance between the player body and the soil. So we're simply going to copy all of this code, and we're actually going to change the interactable object script. We don't want to use this anymore. So you can comment this out, you can delete this. We're actually changing this script because we want to start using this new way with all of the items. So we didn't touch this script for a lot of episodes, and now we finally want to change this and start using this new method. Just something that I want to point out, this will now change all your pickable items. So all the items that have interactable objects will start using this method. So yes, you can remove the extra box collider from these items, and you also need to make sure that this range is far enough or short enough for your taste. You can also take this out and place it as an exposed variable and then change it from the inspector. Let's name it detection area or detection range. So this will be the detection range, and then we're simply going to check if the distance of the player is smaller than the detection range. It means that it's actually inside the range. So now we can pick up these tomatoes because if we go into our resources, we have a tomato and we have this interactable object, and it means that we are going to be able to click on it and pick it up. But the game is going to crash because we have no inventory item to instantiate when we pick up this tomato. We need an inventory item of a tomato. So we're simply going to grab one of these things, for example, this stick. We're going to press Ctrl D, and it's going to duplicate it, and we're going to rename it. But before we rename it to tomato, we need to notice this one because we cannot have the same name in the same folder. So this we're going to rename to be tomato model, and for the inventory item, we're just going to say tomato. Now, of course, we also want to change the name over here. We can set the functionality and the description, but we're not going to waste time on this. We don't need these things. I mean, yes, you can actually set some kind of calories. So let's say 200 calories and maybe 20 health, and it's going to be usable because we can consume it. Well, actually consumable, and we also want it to be trashable, and that's it. So this will be the inventory item that is going to be added into the inventory when we pick up the tomato. Of course, we can also change the image. I don't have any tomato images. Maybe I'm going to create later. For now, I'm just going to use some kind of red sprite. Let's say this one. So we start the game and we plant our tomato plant. And now we can click on the actual plant and see over here. Now it's plant age 1 and we can already see the young model because it changes at plant age 1. If we wait 2 more days, it's going to reach mature model, and then if we wait 1 more day, it's going to reach the first produce. Then when we pick up one of these fruits or even all of them, it's going to wait 2 more days to create a new batch. So let's wait for all of these tomatoes to grow. So now we have these tomatoes, and let's pick up one of them, and we can see that it was added into the inventory and we have it over here. Now we can also see that inside our plant, inside the spawns, one is missing. So now if we look over here at the days for new produce, it says 2, and now it's going to check and see that this spawn is empty and it instantiated this new tomato, and now it will wait 2 more days to add a new one. So if I pick up all of these tomatoes, it's going to wait 2 days and this counter is going to go down, and then it's going to add 4 new tomatoes. So we can see that this is working as well. Now if we go to the plant, we see this is one-time harvest, and this basically allows us to pick up the entire plant when it reaches the mature age. Now, in order to make this work, we need to modify the plant code. So we need the code to always check if this script is a one-time harvest or not. And we don't want to allow produce if it's a one-time harvest because it's not relevant for it. So over here, we're going to check if it's not a one-time harvest, then simply check the produce, right? If it's a regular plant, like the tomato plant, check the produce. Otherwise, don't check the produce because this is not relevant. We don't want to generate new fruits. But inside the check route, we do want to check if it reached the mature state, and then it means that it's the final state. So over here, we check if the plant age is bigger or equals the mature model, and it's also a one-time harvest plant, then we want to be able to pick up this entire plant. So basically the mature model will be the final fruit model, okay? Now of course you can add more stages, but in the regular plant, this will be a seed, this will be some kind of seedling, this will be a mature plant, and then we're also going to add fruits to this model. But if it's a one-time harvest, this will be a seed, this will be some kind of young model, and this will be the actual plant. So over here, we're going to add the entire watermelon or the entire pumpkin, and then we're going to be able to pick up the entire thing. Now we're going to generate this method, and we can see it over here, but we're not going to touch it yet. We're going to come back to this later. Now, in order to test everything out, we need to create another plant. A plant that will be a one-time harvest plant. So we can go to our resources folder, and I'm going to duplicate the tomato plant, so Control D. And I also want to duplicate the tomato seed. inventory item, and also the tomato inventory item. And later we're also going to add the actual fruit. We actually don't need the fruit, we're going to place the fruit inside the plant itself. So the tomato inventory item, we're going to rename pumpkin. For the tomato seed, we're going to rename pumpkin seed. And for the tomato plant, we're going to rename it to be pumpkin plant. So we have the seed, we have the actual inventory item, and we also have the pumpkin plant. So let's leave this sprite the same, but we need to rename it over here. And we also want to rename the inventory item. And for the plant, we need to do more changes. So we're going to drag it into one of these dirt piles. We can zoom in. And at this point, if we make things visible, we can see again the young plant and we can see the mature plant, right? So we can leave it this way. We can just add the actual pumpkin, or you can change the model to have something different. If we go back into the prefabs, we can find different kinds of plants, but we have this pumpkin plant, and if we drag it over here, we can see that it looks different. And we also have the pumpkin fruit. So for the pumpkin plant, we can simply take this young plant model, and all we need to do is remove it. Well, we first need to unpack the prefab. We are going to remove this plant, and we're going to place this one inside of it. Over here. So this will be young pumpkin plant. Of course, we also want to unpack it, and we want to 0 it, maybe even lower it like this. Then we also want to change the actual material because it doesn't look good. And for the mature plant model, we don't need all of these things anymore. We don't need the tomatoes, we don't need the spawns, so we can simply delete this part. And instead, we're going to drag the actual fruit as the mature. So we can name it mature, we can name it just pumpkin fruit. Anyway, we're going to unpack it as well. And we're going to 0 it over here. And now over here inside the pumpkin plant itself, where we have the plant script, we don't need all of these things. So it doesn't matter if these are missing. It doesn't matter because we disabled this part inside the code, so it will never look for these. Then we can also make it 0. For the tomato model, we're going to provide it with nothing because we don't need to instantiate any kind of model. So also here, let's just select none. The seed can stay the same. For the young plant model, we're going to use this young plant model. And for the mature, we're going to use this pumpkin fruit. And of course, we can disable this for now. And we can also disable this for now. Let me just bring it up a bit. Like that. And now again, we can keep all of these numbers. We can wait 1 day for the young model, then wait 2 more days. Let's wait 2 more days so it will be faster. And we don't need age for produce. We don't need days for new products because all of this is not relevant. Most important part is to select is one-time harvest. Now, of course, we want to be able to pick up the plant when it reaches this stage over here. But we want to pick up the entire plant, so we're going to select the pumpkin plant and we're going to add an interactable object script on it. We also need to add a collider just so it will actually detect this entire object. So we can say box collider or sphere collider, and we just make sure that it has the right sizes. We can make it a bit smaller. And over here, we're going to give it the name. But we disable the interactable object because we don't want to be able to pick up this object yet, only when it actually reaches this stage. So we're going to disable this, and then inside the script, inside the make plant pickable, we are going to find this component, and we're going to make it enabled. And of course, because we created another seed, we also need to check this seed inside our script. So inside the equip system, we go over all of these switch cases, and over here we need to add another case for pumpkin seed, and this will return the hand model. Now back over here, we want to make sure that all the different pumpkin seeds have changed their names. The pumpkin itself has a different name, the pumpkin plant. So this is what is going to be instantiated. Let's wait a second. So we see that these changes are not changed, and that's just because we have a new prefab over here. We can delete this and create a new prefab out of this one. And now we can see that this is the actual pumpkin plant. And now we can also see that on the pumpkin itself, we have this interactable object and we have this collider. So it doesn't matter that the plant has this and not the actual pumpkin fruit, because anyway, it's going to get this name and it's going to instantiate it inside our inventory. So let's see if everything is working. And of course, before that, we need to add a pumpkin seed into the inventory so we can use it. So we go into the canvas, inventory screen, and we add the pumpkin seed over here. Let's also change this sprite so it will look like a pumpkin, something like a pumpkin. Let's say this thing over here. So now we're going to select the pumpkin seed and we're going to plant it. And now we need to wait. At this time, we can also plant the tomato seed over here. Now we wait. So we can see that we got this youngling pumpkin plant. And if we wait one more day, it's going to become into a full pumpkin. Of course, you can play around with this model. This one will take longer. And now this became into a pumpkin, and this is just the second stage. So now we can pick up this pumpkin. We can also see the hand, and now it was added into our inventory, and we can see it over here. Now if you notice, we still see this pumpkin name inside the soil, even though the plant itself is destroyed. And the reason is because we did not delete the information inside the soil itself. So we go into the plant script, and over here we're going to add another method, the onDestroy method. And this method is a built-in method, and it's called each time this script is destroyed. So when the plant is going to get picked up and destroyed, this method is going to be called, and we can use this to remove all the data from the soil. So in order to get the soil that this plant is planted in, we can simply do get component in parent, right? And then we look for the soil script and we check is empty, and we set it to be true because after this is destroyed, it will be empty. And we do the same thing, but with the plant name. And we can also do it for the current plant. Let's see. Current plant, but we also see that it's private, so let's make it public. And we're going to set it to be null. And if you still don't understand why we're getting the component in parent, and that's just because this plant will always be a child of the soil, right? The plant will be inside one of these. So the parent is this dirt pile, and the dirt pile has this soil script. So we basically get the soil script from the parent. That's why we use this get component in parent. And now if we plant our pumpkin and we wait, and we pick up this pumpkin, now there is nothing inside the soil and we deleted all the data. So now we can plant something new inside of it. So all of this is working, and the last thing we need to do with our planting and harvesting system is adding the option to water our plants. Of course, there's still many things that we can add, but these are things that are unique to your game and you need to learn how to do them. I'm just showing you the basic things. So as we know, up until now, all of our plants were enabling this is watered boolean. And it doesn't matter what we did, it was always enabled, and it means that they were always watered. And that's why they could grow, because over here we always check if the plant is water, only then make it grow. But now we want to become responsible for this is watered boolean, and only if we actually water the plant, this will get triggered, and if we don't water the plant, this will not be triggered. So we're going to start by creating some kind of model for the watering can. I'm going to use this model. You can find a link in the description for this website. You simply need to download the FBX. I think you also need to register, but it's free and you can use this model. Then you simply need to add it and position it inside the player tool holder so it will be in front of the player. So let's find this and do it together. So I have it inside my models folder, and over here we can see the actual prefab, and it has different parts, but that's not interesting. Over here we don't need to touch anything, but we simply want to drag it into the tool holder. We can unpack it from being a prefab, and now we need to start positioning it. We can use the scene, and we can see that's close to the player. So let's just move this. Maybe even make it bigger. Maybe not that big. And we can see the changes over here. So you just find some kind of position in the middle of the screen. I also want to change this material. So let's go into our materials. And let's create some kind of new material. Let's drag it on the watering can. And let's change the color to something metallic. Let's also add it to the handle. And we can make it a bit more metallic. So when you find the exact position, you simply need to make a prefab out of it. You can rename it to be watering can, and then drag it into the resources folder because we're going to instantiate it from this place. So we drag it over here and we delete it from the scene. Of course, you can add some kind of animation, some kind of swing animation, or when you click, then it goes and lowers down, but we're not going to deal with this. So after we have this watering can, we also want to create the inventory item for the watering can in order to instantiate it. So again, let's just take the tomato seed, Control D, duplicate it, and let's rename this to be watering can. So again, it's not going to work because we already have this watering can over here. So let's add model to this. And this will be watering can. We can also change the name over here. And it will be equipable. This is the important part. It should be equipable. And we can also change the image. It's not really important. Maybe we are going to use this. And now we basically just want to be able to hover over our soil when this watering can is in our hand and click, and it will use the watering can and water the soil. So for this kind of interaction, we go into the selection manager, and over here we are going to find this block of code for the soil interaction, and we want to actually reach into the final else. So we have this if soil is empty and player is holding seed, else if soil is empty, and else. So we want to go into this third else, and over here we're going to add another if else, and this thing we're going to place into the else. So if the soil is not empty and if the player is not holding a seed, so it means there is just some kind of plant there, then we have two options. Either we're holding a watering can in our hand, or we're not holding anything in our hand. So this is if we're not holding anything in our hand, and this is if we're holding a watering can. So over here we need to check if we're holding a watering can. So equip system instance is player holding watering can. So we're going to have this method inside the equip system. And then if we're actually holding a watering can, we're going to do another if soil. Yeah, we need to change the access modifier. So we go over here, we make it public. So if this soil is watered, we don't want to be able to water it again, right? So we simply copy this and we say the plant name and true. So we basically do the same thing as here. But if it's not water, we want to be able to water it. So over here we say use watering can, and we also check if the player actually presses on the button. So if we press on the left mouse button, it's going to water the plant, and then is watered will become true. And we also want to change the way the soil looks, so we are going to use this method for this. Now, if I'm not mistaken, inside our soil itself, we have a reference to the plant. So we don't really need to do all of this. We don't need to go into the child of the soil and look for the plant and then is water. We can simply change it to be current plant. And the same way over here, current plant. Now we are going to generate this method, and it's going to get generated inside the soil itself. And we also want to generate this method inside the equip system. So first we're going to generate this one, and over here it's going to be very similar to this check that we had before with is player holding seed. So let's copy all of this. And we're going to change a few things. So it's very similar. We're simply checking if the name of the thing that we're holding is watering can. And we obviously don't need to have a full switch statement because we're not going to have many options, right? We only want to check one thing. But imagine that you have different watering cans and each one have a different name. For example, old watering can, or maybe high quality watering can. So you can use this to check all of these names. So now we have this check over here, And if it's a watering can, it's going to return true, and if not, it's going to return false. Next, we're going to deal with this make soil watered, and for this we're going to create two materials. One will be the default material for the soil, and one will be the watered material. So we go over here. So now that we have both of these, we need to add these materials over here. And then when they're going to be added, we're simply going to check over here. And we also want another method to make it not watered, right? So make soil not watered. And this will happen at midnight. So at midnight, it's going to check if the soil is watered, it's going to age the plant, but then it's going to reset the soil so it's no longer watered. So over here, we're going to set the default material. Now we want to create both of these materials. So if we go into one of our dirt piles, we can find this dirt pile material. And if we want to find it inside the project, we'll simply go over here and select material. So we have this dirt pile. And now we can simply drag this into the soil script, right? So we drag the dirt pile into the default material. And if we apply, it's going to apply it to all the different prefabs. But now we also want the watered material. And for this, we're going to have a duplicate of this one. I already did it. But all you need to do is Control D, duplicate this one. And in the second one, you can rename it to be watered dirt. And you simply go to the color and you choose a darker color. You can also see the change on the actual model. So if we go to this one, so if we go to one of these dirt piles and we select this color, we can see that it looks a bit more watered, right? A bit darker, but we want to use this one. And for the watered one, we can simply rename it. I already have this created, right? So you simply select a darker color, and then you're going to select one of these dirt piles and drag it into the watered material. Now that you have both of them, you can apply the changes, and now all the different dirt piles will have a reference to these materials. Now to test this, of course, we also need to instantiate the water can. So we go into the equip system, and over here we need to check if we're pressing on the water can inside the inventory. So we want to instantiate the watering can model. And of course, make sure that all these names are correct. So the watering can model should be the same as the one that we have over here. And for the inventory item, we have the watering can without spaces. You can have a space, but you also need to have a space over here, right? And now we want to add the watering can into the inventory to test everything out. So now we can plant the tomato seed, and we can pick up the watering can. Of course, you can create some kind of crafting recipe to create yourself a watering can. Maybe you can buy it from the shop or something like that, but it's up to you. Then we're going to instantiate this, and we can see use watering, and when I click, it changes the soil, and now the soil is watered. So now when it reaches midnight, it's going to see that it's watered, it's going to age the plant, and then it's going to make it unwatered again. But that's actually not happening, right? It's not making it unwatered again. We can see that the soil is still watered, and that's just because we did not add the code for this. So now it's going to stay watered for eternity. So let's also make it unwatered when we reach midnight. So inside the plant script, we go to the day pass method, and over here at the end of the day pass, we check if the plant is watered. Well, we actually don't need to create another one because we have this one over here. But if the plant is watered, then it's watered becomes false, and get component in parent, soil, make soil not watered. Okay, so when we reach the end of the day, if the plant is watered, it's going to increase the age of the plant, but it's also going to make it not watered for the next day. And it's also going to change the soil material back to the default material. Now all of this should work. I also want to add some kind of watering sound. So if we go to the selection manager, and over here when we actually click and water, then I'm going to play this sound. So I can go to the sound manager and add some kind of channel. So sound manager, and let's see what we have here. Let's go into the sound manager. We have the different audio sources. So yes, we have an audio source for each sound, and it's a rather old way to do it. It's not a good way to do it. We obviously should play different sounds on one audio source, but we're not going to deal with this right now. So I'm just going to add another audio source. And I'm also going to add now we go to the sound manager and we need to add another audio source. We're going to drag it into the watering channel over here. We're going to disable the play on awake, and we don't need any clip inside of it because we're going to add a clip manually over here. So we go to the sound folder and I have it over here, the watering clip. So I'm going to drag it into this slot, and now I can simply access it from anywhere in my code. So I will go to the selection manager again. And over here, I'm simply going to take the watering channel, right? Let's call it watering channel. So watering channel, play one shot, and I want to play the clip that I just added, watering can. So now all of these things are working and we can start expanding upon it. We can add a bunch of different fruits and plants and vegetables and go wild with the planting and the harvesting. Now, as I told you, for the watering can, it can be some kind of recipe that you can craft. You can buy it from a shop, and you can also add more details to the watering can. For example, you can go to some kind of water source and fill up the watering can. So for this, you can simply add some kind of script on the watering can that will have the water capacity. And then when you go to this water source, you can press on a button, it will fill up the water amount. And then if you have enough water, you can go and water. But again, there's a lot of things you can do, and I can't cover all of these things. Another thing that I want to mention is that with the one-time harvest plant, you can have some bugs, because if we go to the resource and we go to the pumpkin plant, which is a one-time harvest plant, if we drag it inside the dirt pile and we click on the pumpkin plant, we can see that we have this sphere collider. And the sphere collider will block different raycasts. So what you can do is simply remove the sphere collider when it's not interactable. And when you make this interactable, then you also enable the sphere collider, right? So you can keep both of them disabled, and then you simply go to your plant. And over here, when you make the plant pickable, you also get the component sphere collider, and you make it enabled. And then also when the day is passing, you make it false again. So it will basically just appear when you can finally pick up the fruit and you don't need to water it anymore. And this way it will not interfere and create different bugs. So that's all for this system. In the next episode, we're going to continue with the series, adding more things that you request. So thank you for watching. Please subscribe. Please leave a like. It will help me a lot. Also leave a comment. And I'll see you next time.